In our very last video of CAS Talks, we will shed light on the ethical issues surrounding gene editing. Let us hear an excerpt from our interview from Dr. Calvin Ho.
What are the risks of genome editing?
Well, quite a few, I think, but currently one of the most pressing thinking about risk would be in terms of welfare and safety. Because as you know, the technology itself is still being developed. There are many things that we don't fully understand. I think most broadly we still don't quite understand how the genome itself works. So if we are hoping to rely on this technology, for instance, to have some changes in, say, behavior or something as complex as intelligence, then clearly such an expectation would not be properly grounded in what the science itself can do. But most immediately, even if we're talking about particular disorders such as Huntington, we, at least as I understand it, we're not quite there yet in terms of being able to do this in a manner that is safe for patients.
So is there a possibility where genome editing will be abused? So maybe if we have it established, genome editing to be quite established in the future, do you think that it will be abused in like any other way, not just for medical uses, maybe for cosmetics, possibly something along those lines?
Yeah, I think such misuse, I would say, is likely to happen. We've seen that in relation to some other kinds of technologies, like for instance stem cells, because that has been used for all kinds of purposes, some of which would not be supported by the science itself. So one of the biggest problems with that is that over time it undermines public trust in scientific initiatives. So I think quite rightly one of the concerns of our scientific colleagues working in the field is to ensure that there is proper communication with the public in order to help them understand what's currently achievable, what are some of the challenges ahead, and in terms of feasible targets that we are working towards. I think setting the right expectation is extremely important at this stage so that we do not have developments that will hamper this very important scientific development.
So in your personal opinion, what do you think is the greatest challenge to convey that genome editing is okay to the public? Or what sort of mindsets do people usually have towards genome editing, like maybe in the general public sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, but public, broadly speaking, tends to be quite optimistic about the technology. Looking at some of the surveys that have already been done, I think in the minds of certain individuals, we are already there in terms of clinical applications. This may be true for a very limited number of somatic cell interventions in terms of gene editing or applying the gene editing technique, but certainly not when we think about, say, modifications at the germline level. So, but still, if you were to talk to some members of the public, they might think, oh, we can already do this, and perhaps some might even think that we should already be doing these things, but clearly that sort of expectation would be wrong, and I think it is important to help the public understand where we're going with this and what are some of the current struggles.
Now, let's hear from Dr. Khan about some of the possible ethical issues that may arise in the future with the introduction of new genetic manipulation technology.
So what do you think are some of the ethical issues that the public might surface with this type of new technologies?
Well, I think, again, it's the question of the safety aspects, the consideration of fairness. If, for example, a particular gene or genome editing method is shown to be efficacious and safe for a particular condition, the question then could become, does everybody who need it have access to it? So the fairness of access would be something that we need to consider as a society. We would certainly not want to have good treatments, new treatments that only the wealthy can access. Of course, the public is always concerned about, this thing about genetic enhancement, which I think is, which is completely a mistake. But that would not be something that would be a real concern.
As we have more and more research with regards to genome editing, let's say in DNA and RNA, what do you think are some of the possible ethical issues that you may foresee in the near future?
In the near future, I think the ethical considerations in the near future would be whether commercial entities would be offering treatments that have not been properly tested. I think that's a real danger. Now that people can go onto the internet, advertise what they claim they can do, I think one needs to be aware of private efforts to market therapies or tests which have really not been well studied, vigorously validated.
Now that you've heard from the experts, what is your personal stance on genome editing? Thank you so much for tuning into CAS Talks.